all of the trite answers of God gave us free will, and that's why there's evil in the world. And when evil entered the world, it disrupted the natural order of things, and that's why there's disease and famine and earthquakes. Those answers felt deeply unsatisfying to me. And I understand there's lots of people that find those answers good enough, and I just didn't.
After watching this interview a few times, I've come to the thought that I think possibly the hardest conversation is not with an unbeliever, but with someone who has walked away from the faith. But this conversation gave me also a lot more hope as to how to approach people and to examine my own faith. Hey, I'm Alex, and this is Cinco Stones, and this is my analysis of a specific interview with the lead singer of Hawk Nelson, who isn't the first Christian artist to walk away from his faith, and sadly won't be the last. But I believe there's going to be a lot of overlap from previous artists' stories, future artists, and his story. So take that into consideration as you're watching this one. This interviewer did a masterful job in asking the right questions and simply listening. Now, I've edited his video for the sake of time because he is very thoughtful in his answers and he takes a long time to answer them. So it might come across not very thoughtful in my video, but you should totally watch the full interview. Now, Rob the interviewer asks some very good questions, but I'm only going to dive into the one question that you would always ask a Christian who walked away from their faith. What caused it? And John's answer is, he was over in another country and he was filming a people that were getting displaced. This was a third world country, and these kids were going to starve. These kids had no home. They might possibly die by the age of 5. And he saw all this brokenness and he couldn't comprehend how a loving God would allow these terrible things to happen. Now, before he even gives this answer, he admits that this is the age-old problem that people have, and he gives the age-old answer to why he's walking away or can't believe in the Christian faith. But as I want to show you some of his answers in the interview, it's going to show a deeper meaning of his lack of understanding of Christianity and how that answer that you just saw earlier was not satisfying to him.
And I don't know how to reconcile that with the idea of a God that loves us so much he would do anything. And the idea, if that was my son, I would break every rule to help him and to take care of him.
He gives 2 answers in there that show some of the cracks in his theology already, or his understanding of God. He says, a God that loves us so much he would do anything. And he doesn't think about the fact that he sent Jesus for us. If it was my son, I'd break every rule to help him. You can argue in some way that God did do that. Out of love, he sent his son for us. That was grace and mercy. He did not need to do that. So he clearly doesn't understand or see Jesus' death on the cross at all and how it completely answers his 2 problems that he has just talked about right now. Now I want to show another one of his answers and how he expounds on his still disbelief and his still struggle with Christianity.
I don't understand why the God that loves us so much, he answers our prayer for a parking spot when we pull into church, the God that loves us so much, he answers even our tiny prayers, that's what I was raised to believe in the culture I was in.
See, the key phrase that he says here is that I was raised to believe the culture that I was in. He never once references scripture. Never once has he started to make that faith that he has been around his own. And because of that, these answers that are from the Bible are not satisfying. Now, to connect this problem that he has connected his faith more to culture than to scripture, here's another answer that he has given. Rob asks him, when did you start to voice your concerns and your thoughts and doubts about Christianity? And he gives this answer.
Maybe around the beginning of 2019 when I had really become more unplugged from Christian music and Christian culture.
He goes, my doubts started to happen when I got unplugged from the culture and from Christian music. His faith, again, is he's showing it's come from culture. It's come from music that, don't even get me started on modern Christian music. But even if it was the best of the best music, you would still need your relationship to be grown and built on scripture, not on anything else. And that's all he's done. And he doesn't even realize this, but he said that for himself earlier in an interview when he said,
but someone else's experience does not suffice as a foundation for your faith. So like for me, like I can't take his experience and go like, oh, well, that's a foundation for my faith. Like
he will readily admit that other people's experiences aren't good for him, but he has readily been taking other people's beliefs through culture and making it his own. Guys, I hope and pray that if you see yourself in him, that this is a wake-up call for you, that you examine your faith, your walk, and you contact somebody in your church, obviously, first and foremost, into scripture. But if you are struggling by yourself, contact somebody in your church, somebody that you feel close to, and say, hey, I think I need to improve my relationship with God. How can I do that? Can you help me? Can you walk with me through this? But what's beautiful is that Rob is actually able to get him to reflect on this himself. And he says this by saying, well, maybe you were never saved in the first place, but he doesn't say it so viciously toward him. He finds another creative way to say it because he was listening to John and hearing what he was saying. This part is beautiful and something that I very much learned and might apply to other people when I'm having conversations. Rob says, you talk about your belief in God as a sweater, and I know all analogies break down in some way, but I also know that what we compare our faith or what we compare marriage to has a lot of implications with how we process it. Rob goes on to say that he views God, or more specifically Jesus, as a parachute, not a sweater, and that the world is a plane and it's going down because sin. We see that in the world, and so the plane is obviously crashing and we need a parachute to save us. So he goes on to ask this question now. When did you start to view your belief in God as more of an accessory like a sweater and not a necessity like a parachute? And John, who genuinely is reflecting and trying to find truth, appreciated that question and the way in which it was approached. And he understood what he was implying, because he'll go on and you'll see his answer.
You know, if I'm being totally honest, I may have thought about it more like a sweater and less like a parachute my entire life.
And then he follows up with this answer right here.
I may have spent my whole life with a perspective of God that was not what maybe you have or what most strong believers have.
And he realizes now, man, I haven't understood God in the biblical sense as devout Christians would. The ones that I have been singing to, the ones that I have been pretending to be, I haven't actually been one for real. And we're quick to say maybe that wasn't his fault, but it really was his fault because he used God for money. And you have to listen closely to this last part that he said.
The idea of singing those songs, if I didn't believe them, was so terrifying to me because I really value honesty.
At first you're thinking, wow, that's really beautiful and honest that he doesn't want to sing songs that he doesn't believe, but keep with it and you're going to hear his real heart behind it.
And I was like, if I find myself in a position where I am financially required to sing these songs, but I don't believe them, that's horrifying. And so when I had questions, I sort of pushed them down and I was like, no. Like, I don't want to think about that. I don't want to process that. Like, let's just stay the course. And I think for a long time, that's what I was doing. And it wasn't till I was sort of more financially free to explore those questions and feel like it wasn't going to destroy my livelihood that I even had the guts to ask myself what I really thought.
It wasn't until he didn't need to rely on Christians and God's blessings that he could actually start to allow himself to question who God was and if he really believed in what he was singing. Once he had gained what he needed to live without God, he then decided to discard God because he thought, you know what, I don't really believe in him after all. I'm not replying to this to cast stones at him because I have applied this to myself, and hopefully you will take this and try to apply it to yourself and examine yourself, examine your motives, and see if you are right with God. Y'all, thank you so much for watching this video and hoping that it spiritually enriched you. If it did, please hit that like button. If it didn't, you should probably watch it again because it should. But no, really, thank you so much, and consider subscribing if you don't want to miss out on any more videos. I also want to continue to do videos on some topics, so if you have any, please put them in the comments below. Thank you so much. Bye.